Hey everybody, Who's Your Jedi here with another review for you. This time talking episode 11 of season 2 of Star Wars Rebels called The Protector of Concord Dawn. And I thought this was mostly an okay episode, but the stuff about it that I really liked are one, we get some really nice characterization of Sabine, and there's some really cool nods to the old Star Wars expanded universe. If I remember correctly, that Concord Dawn, the planet, is a very important place in the history of the Mandalorians in the old expanded universe, and here it's made officially canon. I don't think it's been mentioned before on the show. When Rex talks about Mandalorians being brought in help train the clones on Camino, again, that's from was it Karen Travis's or Travers or however the heck you say that lady's name. That comes from her somewhat controversial interpretation of the Mandalorians, but that was kind of a part of particularly the old EU novels. Um, so that's definitely cool. Well, okay, I was really never one of those people who was never really keen on her ideas regarding the Mandalorians, but I can take this for what it was intended to be. Let me see, what else do we have? One thing I found about when I was doing some reading about this episode, when Kanan talks about, Fenn helping saving his last masters and the life of his master with this airstrike, that actually tied into an issue of the comics that, that have Kanan as the protagonist that came out on the day this episode aired. Now I haven't been reading those comics, but wow, that was some really nice coordination with the marketing people on the Star Wars front. So yeah, very nice there. Let me see what else. Definitely some nice nods to previously established stuff from the old show. I mean, we get to see Death Watch mentioned again, and we learn a little bit more about Sabine's past. And what's particularly intriguing about what she says this episode to me is she mentions that her mother was a member of Death Watch. Uh, Now, this character, her mom, could be anybody, and it'd be kind of cool if we got to meet her, but there's one idea that can't help but pop in my head. Who remembers Satine's Craze's sister, Bo Katan? She was a female Mandalorian who was a member of Death Watch. Sabine, Satine. One letter difference. Now, I'm not saying that Bo Katan. Basically, I kind of think like, well, could it possibly be that Bo Katan is Sabine's mother? Now, again, that's just me spitballing, but the timeline actually would work, which would mean that Sabine is Satine's niece. And, ooh, and remember, Satine was a duchess, so that would actually, I guess, technically make Satine, Mandalorian nobility. Again, interesting stuff. But again, that's just purely speculation on my part, but still. And all this other stuff with the Mandalorians formally challenging each other and all that. I mean, again, very cool, pretty in keeping with the EU established elements of the Mandalorian culture. Now, hopefully, they don't go whole hog on that because again, there are quite a lot of things about Mandalorian culture that, to put it mildly, were very controversial among Star Wars fans. But again, a lot of that comes into just the whole author Karen Travis's interpretation of them. And my stance on it was like she had some cool ideas, but she really put the Mandalorians on a pedestal. And yeah, the Mandalorians are not people to be put on pedestals. Let's put it that way. Um, let's see what else. Again, we get to see Sabine being going out there being really badass, and we get to see Kanan actually being the person going out there and trying to be diplomatic about things, which again really is outside of his comfort zone. But he handles it surprisingly well, at least until you stop and think about it. Jedi are generally trained to try and resolve things diplomatically. And if I remember, I don't remember too much about his master. She wasn't a hugely fleshed out character, to the best of my knowledge, but she was generally portrayed as one of the more Obi-Wan Kenobi-esque Jedi, from what I remember. which is also kind of interesting given that her master was Mace Windu, who was very much a go out there and kick people's asses kind of Jedi. A lot of the time. Mace did understand the value of diplomacy as well, of course. And yeah, nothing really huge to say about Ezra or Hera this episode. Although Hera did get some nice stuff at the beginning, going out there showing that she was again an absolutely amazing pilot and a good and again somebody who understands the value of diplomacy. She's somebody who understands the politics of the situation and is very quick to point out like, hey, let's not make an enemy here if we don't have to. And I do kind of like that the situation, the way it's resolved, is interesting, with the rebels basically taking the leader of these people hostage. That's really not how the rebels have been portrayed as acting. That kind of goes against a lot of what the rebels are supposed to believe in. But it's not entirely unrealistic, or certainly not without real world precedence. Taking quote unquote hostages was a real traditional thing in a lot of cultures all over the world. And if you want something a little bit more pop culture-y for reference, think about Game of Thrones. Think about how Theon Greyjoy was taken from when he was a kid to Winterfell, and that's where he spent most of his life growing up. And this happened because his father lost that war against. His father lost the Greyjoy rebellion against King Robert. Theon was taken from his father to be looked after by the king's best friend, with the understanding of, hey, Balon Greyjoy, if you decide to try anything funny, we got your son. So, and of course, there are numerous examples of this in real world history. So, that too, I think, is really interesting, and also kind of surprising just how bloodthirsty Commander Sato came across in this episode. He's like, really, man? I didn't really read you as the sort of guy who would want to start a fight first. But in any case, it was some good work there. And again, just another really solid episode of the show. I do like how they're making a real effort, as the trailer for the rest of the season has hinted, that they're basically saying, like, look, EU fans, we haven't forgotten about you. We know there was a lot of stuff from the old Star Wars EU that was really cool and that we liked too, and we're going to start working some of that in here. So don't feel like this whole situation has completely flushed all that stuff that you used to love down the toilet. And I've always felt that that idea is kind of a silly way to take it. I mean, sure, it's never fun when a story or something that you like gets retconned, but I've been reading comics for most of my life. So I'm used to these sort of things. I'm used to having entire universes rebooted, used to things being retconned. And I'm always reminded in situations like this of the famous comic book writer Alan Moore, the guy who created stuff like V for Vendetta, From Hell, Watchmen, and numerous other stories. Anyway, so several of Alan Moore's works have been adapted for film to varying degrees of success. And I think there was one time somebody had gone to talk to him, I think it was right after League of Extraordinary Gentlemen, which sucked. Comics were great, but the movie was terrible. And said to him, what do you think about the way your stories have been changed by others? And Alan Moore basically said, well, what are you talking about? And he pointed to his bookshelves. The stories I've written, they're right there. So, yeah, sure, it's kind of a little sad not to have all those cool EU stories be pushed to the side, but it doesn't mean that I can't go back and enjoy the Knights of the Old Republic games, enjoy the Knights of the Old Republic comics, enjoy those Jedi Academy novels and all those other characters from there that I like Zane Carrick and Jerael and Karen Horn, Kyle Katarn, and I mean just so many others. Canderous Ordo. So yeah, I think I've kind of rambled sufficiently for enough. So I'm going to call it here, guys. As always, please comment, rate, and subscribe. And of course, you can follow me on Twitter at Hoosier Jedi. Until next time, take care and have a good one.